Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is a B-movie review and I'll be having a look at AE Apocalypse Earth. So this is an Asylum production, obviously a mockbuster film, and I got the impression this one is trying to sort of go after the After Earth kind of like mockbuster type film. However, it's not really like that as such. It's actually more like a kind of Star Trek episode almost, I would say. Now the story here, we get straight into the action. We see Earth getting invaded by some kind of unseen alien. We just see starships blowing up Earth, and there's basically a kind of some kind of spaceship which takes off and takes a whole bunch of survivors off Earth. However, they sort of crash land on a kind of sort of a jungle planet ultimately at some point later, after they've kind of been in cryo sleep, and they kind of, again, they're kind of in the thick of it. There's some sort of basically other type of creature. They look a little bit like, well, they're basically invisible humans. We don't really see, just see a humanoid outline and kind of just an invisible force ultimately. Kind of a little bit like the Predator sort of stealth armor. They call them chameleons, although you never see them anything other than just kind of invisible shapes. And there seems to be some kind of like indigenous sort of people there as well. And then basically we have our kind of group of survivors try and sort of form some kind of like party and kind of find out what's going on, where they are, and try and kind of hatch a plan maybe to try and escape the planet and ultimately get back to Earth, even though we pretty much saw that getting destroyed at the beginning of the film by some kind of other alien force. Along the way, they kind of meet this sort of female sort of alien who looks like she's got almost like tiger stripes. So other than that, she looks completely human though, however, and she's actually part of this kind of indigenous sort of people, but her sort of skin colouring is a little bit different, hence I guess there's a little bit of sort of racial some elements going on here, so she's sort of outcast. So let's get down to brass tacks. This is an asylum picture that comes with certain connotations, and it's fair to say that this film is, you know, ripe for ridicule to a certain degree. Let's talk about my most major gripe first of all. The editing on this film is atrocious. To give you an example here, after they crash land on this planet, we kind of see like a small group of, I think, 3 survivors. Then all of a sudden we flip to the next scene and there's another survivor that's just magically appeared. We don't, it's just the first female survivor. We have no introduction, it doesn't sort of come out of anywhere. And there's obviously a scene where they kind of run into her that's just not in the film. So there's some really bad editing in this movie. Now, in regards to special effects, okay, so there's 2 sort of types of effects you've got here. So you have the CG effects. Now, we'll say this. I don't think the CG effects are too bad on this film. There's not a lot of them, but we do see some sort of spaceships, and I get the impression maybe the beginning scenes of the sort of Earth destructions, they look pretty decent. But I have a sneaking suspicion they may have been taken out of another film. They just look too good to be just made for this film. I don't know that for a fact. They actually look pretty decent at the beginning. And there's a few shots of like spaceships that are flying around once they're on this planet. They don't look too bad. There are some sort of creature effects, some CG creature effects of a few kind of different indigenous life forms that in there, some giant bugs and a kind of massive lizard thing, and they are maybe a little bit cheaper looking. In regards to the practical effects, so we have these kind of like indigenous humanoid people, but they're basically just people with paint on. So they're not the most exciting of sort of creatures to look at. Now there's a kind of reason for this, and I'll come back to it in a minute, which is going to be a bit of a spoiler. But I want to talk about the cover of the box first of all. So the cover of this box isn't really indicative of what you actually see. And they actually kind of look almost like vampires, and they're really not. And the cover of the box, you have these kind of like sort of pale vampire looking creatures almost fighting space marines. Forget that, nothing to do with the film. So if that box is selling you, forget it. Now why I say it's like Star Trek, the reason why it reminds me of Star Trek is you've got this group of people and you know they've crash landed on this planet. They meet this sort of sexy female alien who is human, all apart from she's almost got, as I say, these kind of like tiger stripes that are print on her skin, which looks very much like these sort of 60s style Star Trek creature or sort of humanoid aliens that they used to sort of come across. And not only that, you've also got this sort of, I guess, android that reminds me a little bit of the Data character from The Next Generation. I guess the general setup as well, it kind of splices between the sort of, what you would see in maybe a Star Trek episode and kind of, you know, that mixed in with obviously After Earth, which is obviously the film that it's trying to sort of, you know, at least hop onto the bandwagon of. Okay, so the effects are a bit of a mixed bag. The acting too is a bit of a mixed bag. And the main character here is a guy called Frank. I think the actor's Adrian, who was in the Highlander TV series. I actually thought he was pretty decent in the role, to be fair, and kind of gave, you know, a fairly sort of earnest performance for, you know, an asylum pick. So my hat off to him. However, the other kind of star in here is Richard Grieco, who just looks like he's on drugs all the time, I have to say. And he's a very sort of, he's meant to be like the captain ultimately, the high-ranking official here, but he just looks like a stoned hippie the whole time. So I have to say he was rather miscast here. The rest of the people, there seems to be a lot of, I guess, I don't know if this was filmed in America, because it seems like there's a lot of maybe foreign actors in here, and the acting ability is kind of questionable for some of them, I have to be honest. But overall, I actually think this had some reasonable elements for an asylum pick. It does have some original ideas. Now, spoiler here, because I do want to talk about something, so there's going to be a spoiler. The twist here, you can see coming from a mile off. So the twist here is that, of course, this planet I've actually crashed on is actually Earth. However, this is telegraphed way in advance, so I don't think it should come as any surprise. And obviously it's aping the film After Earth, which of course we know from the whole point of that film that it's actually Earth just in the future. So I really don't think it's that big of a shock. And this can be argued why these kind of indigenous people are kind of don't maybe look particularly alien-like, although we're told it's kind of 300,000 years in the future or whatever. They've just got different skin colourings. We don't really know much about in regards to these chameleons, these sort of invisible people. I'm not sure if they're meant to be the same aliens that were sort of at the front of the film, because we have literally no information about them whatsoever. And that is, I guess, some of the problem with this film. In some instances, it just doesn't tell you enough information, and other instances you'll have like massive exposition, like with these. There's one example where Frank uses his sort of poisonous fruit to sort of throw into the mouth of this sort of lizard, and they really sort of make a point of saying, don't eat those fruit, it's poisonous. And of course the next scene he's like picking this fruit and throwing it in, just in case you didn't pick up on it. So it does have some good points, this film. It's certainly probably better than some of the asylum picks, but there's also some glaring faults here. So it's a bit of a difficult one to review in a way, because as I say, I think there's some elements of this film which are actually pretty decent, but there's also some massive holes. So I'm going to have to give this one a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? Let me know what your thoughts are. Leave me a comment, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.